Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna. Oh, welcome to another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Sorry for the lack of an episode last week. We had a little bit of issues getting a recording scheduled together with my work. I'm still working out in Wisconsin 5 days a week right now, so there's a lot of travel back and forth, and it's just been very trying without Hannah as much to spend time on the show. But with that being said, we have another special guest. Boyce from Mindful Skeptics is going to join us again for tonight's show. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Another beautiful day in Michigan, baby.
Yeah, it's finally cooling off out here, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's actually walking weather, like I call it jeans and flip-flops weather.
I know. I was excited. We were able to sit outside for a fire, all sorts of stuff that we weren't able to do before. So,
yeah, it's been sticky.
But with that being said, I have a quick update on Hannah. He has officially sold his house and he is moving, so he should be able to get back into the swing of things here in hopefully another month to month and a half. So that's exciting. He accepted his job offer and I believe is officially living in Cleveland, or will be within a week. So that's good news for him. So and I messaged him and asked him if he could spend some time, trying to help, maybe not record, but at least make a guest appearance.
Yeah.
So thought that would be fun.
Yeah. Heck yeah. Oh, Chrissy Poo.
With that being said, we have a good episode planned tonight. There's two main topics that we just can't help ourselves. The first topic, obviously, is the trade wars. So we want to talk a little bit about, what's happening with Trump and all those different things. Because if you haven't heard the news, China is now decided that they want to put tariffs on goods coming to us. Isn't that crazy?
Tit for a tat, man. You didn't see that coming.
So there's an article that CNBC released that talks a little bit about, what China is going to be doing, what goods, where they're going to put their tariffs. Essentially what they're saying is they're going to put tariffs ranging from 5 to 10% on $75 billion of U.S. goods. Now, I don't know exactly what China makes, but I do know they make brake pads and rotors for cars, for example. That's a big industry over there. And when I worked in the auto parts industry, it's funny because you had your cheap ones that you could buy, and then your next level up, which is like the store self-branded ones. They were the exact same thing, literally. They just were store self-brand. We offered a little bit different warranty on it, that type of thing. But that was it. They were the exact same rotor and stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So have you heard anything at all, Boyce, about any of these tariffs?
No, I you're just waiting with just waiting by clutching the pearls for China to retaliate, which is obvious. But it doesn't really say anything specifics like when Trump released his stuff, his people had a list of things he'd be tariffing. And then he changed his mind, of course. He put very little thought into it, considering fucking Christmas is coming. And he's going to tariff electronics and TVs and cell phones and, the obvious hot topics for the holiday shopping season coming. So at least that was specific, but the China one hasn't really been very specific to the public yet. But there's two batches, one in September 1st, and the other one's December 15th, right before the holiday too. So that'd be interesting. Yeah.
And the state councilman for China basically said, in response to the measures of the U.S., China is forced to take countermeasures, right? The Chinese side hopes that the American or that the U.S. will continue to follow the consensus of the Oskawa meeting and returning the correct track of consultation to resolve their differences. And actually, I believe there's a summit in September that they all get to meet at. Now, I don't know what happens at these summits. I can only imagine Trump walks in, he kind of, throws his weight around, smiles a little bit, puts his hands in his pocket, and says, not doing business. You're all bankrupt. Walks out.
With his arms closed, with his face all pussed up, like he did before in that European, was that G7 summit, the last one last year?
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Arms crossed, nobody's talking to him. They're all talking behind him. That looks about right.
Yeah, that's just how I see him doing that. Maybe he wouldn't, or maybe he won't. I don't know. But that's how I feel it is.
It depends on what his mood is in the day, which is like, what I don't get is he's acting like someone who's literally chemically imbalanced because he has no trajectory. It's just this, he's a wild radical when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah. And Trump and the Chinese president already are, like I said earlier, are scheduled to go back to talks, coming up here. But the big problem becomes is they can set up talks all they want. They can do all these other things. But the problem becomes is if they don't, if nobody acts on it, right? And then if Trump doesn't follow through with it. So what happens when Trump doesn't follow through?
Well, that's the thing. Then you lose your credibility for establishing a deal. You got to have some credibility that you'll actually do what you say. And he has proven a half dozen times already that he'll say one thing to their face, then go on Twitter on the plane ride back home and totally contradict himself. And then he'll do something that neither one of those things were agreed with. He just changing shit. He's always moving the goalpost with his own goals.
Yeah. It's like he gets what he wants and then changes his mind on what he really wants,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which is just insane. It's like, that almost feels like a gaslighting tactic,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, maybe that's just me, but that just kind of almost feels like a gaslighting tactic. Like he wants to do this based on the fact that he got what he wants. And maybe it's a business thing. I don't know. Maybe in a business world on a high level, they do those things. I have no idea. My company doesn't. And a lot of the companies that we consult for don't do that. They either change the contract through, scoping measures, or we have different conversations where we work towards, ensuring that the big questions are answered,
Mm-hmm. Well, and two is like he's almost bartering with national policy behind him to strong arm people. Where he's like, I know I want the price to be. We want to make another $200 billion off of tariffs, so I'm going to start out and tax them $300 billion in tariffs, in hopes of just getting my 200. That type of stupid ass approach is it's like a used car salesman. This car's worth $10,000. I'm going to put it on for sale for $15,000, and I'll still get my 10 when I really only paid $5,000 for it. Ugh.
Yeah. And the thing becomes is, this affects everything on a global scale, right? This is a global scale relationship that, we have one of the largest economies. So does China. China has a huge economy,
Absolutely. Well, it's going to become a pandemic of trade wars, and we're already subsidizing our farmers, only the big ones, really. Not the mom and pops, but there's these big, huge combine type of multi-million acre farmers are getting these subsidies from the government, from our tax dollars, for him to play chicken pretty much with tariffs with China.
Yeah. And, one of the big things that always comes out is espionage, right? Like Trump's a conspiratorialist when it comes to this. And I'm sure China does use intelligence, means to spy on us and do different things like that. But, honestly, are we not doing the same thing? We have to be.
Of course. And that's what I get kind of crack up when people talk about Trump or Russia interfering with our elections. We interfere with most elections around this world on a regular basis. We just they don't talk about it because it's like it's like a gentleman's game, We're both going to try and screw each other behind each other's backs, but we'll still shake hands at the end of this,
Yeah.
Who screws each other over the best.
Exactly.
Well, and that's what Tulsi Gabbard talks about with regime change wars. That's the whole point. Control the other election by changing them by either political ways or by arming one side over the other or militarily backing another regime. That's another form of electoral persuasion, if you will. A little more direct.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, we've been doing this for years. We just don't like it when people, do it for us.
Yeah.
So
kind of like tariffs.
Yeah, kind of like tariffs. Yeah, we want to give them out, but we don't want people to agree with them.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting is that the European Commission filed a complaint with the World Trade Organization over some of our rules, right? So people are filing complaints against us. It's not doing any good. Like, nothing's happening. But people are actually filing complaints over, different things that are out there, right? And they're filing complaints against China. So there's a couple of sticking points here. It's not just them, it's both of us that are like violating World Organization rules and regulations.
Yeah, like asylum.
Exactly.
We love breaking rules all of a sudden in the last 2.5 years. It's barbaric, but we think we're better on the world stage to do whatever we want and then get pissed when someone else steps up and says, oh yeah, two can play that game. That's typical bully tactic,
Exactly. So them responding isn't really that big of a deal to some extent. I mean, it is a big deal, right? But it's not a surprise. There you go. It's not a surprise deal, for it.
No, it's easily predicted.
And have you ever heard, is there other trade wars? I mean, I know there's that show called Storage Wars.
Yes. I don't think so. Trade wars, man. It's never worked in the past, and I don't know, man. It just never works out, especially when we have so little skin in the game as far as leverage, because China really has most leverage because it's a state-sponsored business.
Yeah.
And they can do whatever they want.
Exactly. And so if we go back, let's just go back and to examine exactly what a trade war is. So if you Google trade war, they basically essentially say it's an economic conflict resulting in extreme protectionism in which a state raises or creates tariffs or trade barriers, against another party, right? So if we look at why are we doing this to China, well, it's, in my opinion, it feels like it's because Trump doesn't know where else to get some of this money from. Therefore, why not have other people pay for it? Is that kind of your take on why we're at a trade war?
Well, yeah, because he pretty much pushed through an executive order almost through the Senate to get the 1% tax cut, which was a couple $1 trillion with no plan to pay for it whatsoever. And this is him kind of just trying to shore up and connect the dots where there's this huge gap. Well, we'll get all these jobs back. Well, it's taken a lot longer than he thought, like as much thought as he can put past the tip of his nose, really. But he had a plan in his head. He didn't execute. Now he's scrambling to hurry up. And this is a gangster tactic. He's what do you want to call that? Extorting businesses. And now he's going to extort the Chinese government for tariffs to fill in the gap. He's got to pay up to his donors, which is what he's done first things first. But now he's got to find the money. And that's kind of what it looks like. He's just scrambling to do that. And then he ordered all U.S. companies to get out of China. His command, he say, or some shit like that.
Yeah.
A direct order. And it's just silliness. This is a democracy.
Yep. And there was a we posted this Tariff Act, and I don't know if you've ever heard of this. This is from the 1930s, right? And there was a law which implemented protectionism trade policies in the United States, right? So this is a law that dates all the way back to Herbert Hoover days, like before everything crashed. And the tariffs under this act, not including duty-frees, were the second highest in the United States in 100 years to exceed another a tariff that they had over 100 years ago. The act and the following regulatory tariffs by American trade partners were major factors in the reduction of American exports and imports by more than half during the Depression. Now, if we just go back to this, and again, this act is probably a little bit different, in fairness, because this was not initiated by the president. back then, at least from what I can tell. But this act, essentially was proposed. People said this is good. And then look what happened. It started some of the depression. And again, the depression is a very complex discussion we could have, right? We could have spent a whole show on that. But you have to admit that when you start decreasing your exports and imports and you don't have a way to control or make money outside of your own four walls, you have a hard time sustaining everything. You just do.
Yeah. Well, and it's even more, it's an order of magnitude now with a world trade, with world travel, with air, with the internet. It'd be amplified significantly. The depression probably took 2 decades to build up to. This could take 2 years. As far as the stock market drops 600 points in a day because of Trump's tweet.
Yeah.
That's how volatile it is right now, that he is such an unknown. And the market reflects their uncertainty. And it could just be so much worse, so much faster.
Yep. And the funny thing was, for this older one from the 1930s, Henry Ford actually went to the White House to propose a vetoing of this, right? It's funny to see these large capitalists, but we don't have that right now. I mean, what capitalists are doing that right now? Where's the capitalists out there that's going through this and going, oh, hey, maybe this is not a good idea, Trump. You do understand you're affecting our business. I don't know. I guess maybe I'm out of the loop, but I haven't heard of a lot. I mean, I didn't hear the Koch brothers coming out against Trump on this.
Well, the politicians aren't even reading it. Alone enough, a CEO of a major car producer, which probably has more stock in the game as far as that goes. But our elected officials should be taking the time. They're being paid to do this. Sit down and read the damn thing and critique it. And that's why the government shouldn't have the president doing these orders by himself. You need more than one person looking at it from different backgrounds to say, well, we could tweak it a little bit here, a little bit there. But this is Caesar, making snap judgment decisions. He's like Caligula. I say so, that's the way it is. And if you don't like it, I'll kill you, the Republic, whatever, like this whole murderous type of, like I said, it's a game of chicken with tariffs where one person's calling the shots for 320 million people. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And that's the problem here. We have all of these things happening. We can look back in history and see what's happened. And yet here we are pushing forward with it again. And, it's China, right? I mean, to some extent, they're not going to sit down and just take it, right? They're going to do something. Something's going to come out of this.
Well, and as them being I think they're the top producers of manufactured goods now, right? China?
I believe so, yes.
At least top 2 or 3. We're not. We're not a productive country. We are a supportive type of, medicine and stuff like that. Like, we don't make things like we used to. And so China has all the leverage. They could close their borders and say, screw you. We won't import jack shit from you. We'll find it somewhere else. We'll get our corn from South America or Mexico. They could easily do that and just totally shut us out. And then we're going to have a really, really big problem. And like I said, quick. If China exercised their rights like Trump is abusing ours, they could really strangle us a little bit there and cause some real stress on us and the world. Technically, the world market will be very volatile then.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny, another one, there is something, I was doing a little research earlier, and there's another thing called the chicken war. Have you ever heard of the chicken war?
No.
And I thought this would be a good note to end on because I think this is hilarious. In the 60s, France and Germany imposed high tariffs on American chickens because the demand for European chickens fell because people thought American chickens were cheaper or were more savory and they were more cheap, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we retaliated with imposing high tariffs on commodities like French brandy, Volkswagen buses, and then we also threatened to pull NATO troops out of Europe. But the funny thing is, when you look at that, right, you just look at that, like the chicken wars. Here they're fighting over bloody chicken. And, I don't think anything really came of it. Obviously, it's not in the history books. Nobody really pays attention to any of that. But at the exact same time, you can see what happened. The two escalations did nothing. Volkswagen buses sucks. They're not even around anymore. We could have been one of the larger consumer. French brandy, I don't know if that's around or not. I don't drink brandy, so I think it's disgusting.
When was this chicken war?
1960.
Damn, that's pretty recent, too.
Yeah, but you never hear about it, right? Because essentially there wasn't enough tariffs involved to affect anything. Whereas the first one we talked about from the 1930s, what was it? It's the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930. That affected a lot. That was part of the Great Depression. The chicken wars, I don't know. I mean, how big is chicken of an export for Americans? I don't know.
I think we eat a lot of chicken right here.
Yeah, and I don't. Even if we export a lot of it, I just don't think it's not a big enough part of our economy that a tariff on one item. But what Trump's doing is putting tariffs on how many items? What is China now doing? The same thing. And we're going to get to this escalation point where it could be World War III, essentially. Yeah.
Economic world war is what we do. That's what the thing is, we struck first. And to me, it's called a trade war. That verbiage is very specific. And I think we should really maybe even regulate that term in Congress and say, listen, the president shouldn't be able to declare war militarily or economically.
Hey.
This should go through Congress.
Yeah.
He declared a trade war with China for shits and giggles on Twitter just because he felt like it. That's just ridiculous. Why do we vote for Congress people if they have no say?
Yep. And I don't know who I was talking with that. I was talking with somebody, and I can't remember who it was, but I was talking with somebody that basically started to say, hey, that's why we should get rid of Congress, right? And the representatives, and just go to a public vote and get rid of it. Basically, it's the most popular vote, But that has its whole other effects. But you could kind of see if they're not going to pay attention and do anything, and they're all these just bought out conscripts, then at some point, screw it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Again, that's a good reason for term limits, maybe not banishing Congress altogether. We have checks and balances for a reason. There's three parties involved there for a reason. It's like saying get rid of the Supreme Court. We should vote on if someone's illegal as a country. Well, should Jimmy go to jail for raping her for how long? Life for 25 years, or should he be executed? Let's go to Twitter and find out. That's just madness. We vote for these people for a reason. The Constitution's there for a reason. The Constitution is a living, breathing document that we should be updating. That's what amendments are all about. And it's time for an update, a significant update in 2021, January, 16th or some shit. It needs to be we need to really think about updating with some amendments on this Constitution to limit the power of the president, because the executive branch shouldn't have that much power to override everything else. So the two branches, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, especially because the executive branch has the ability to push through nominations for the Supreme Court. They have the ability to declare war. They have the ability to do, to veto things and then to overwrite things, to pass, legislation to some extent without approval from anyone else. And it feels like we're moving towards a more communist regime. And people will argue with me. Like my father would sit here and go, no, we're not. Trump's not making us communist. He's the capitalist, blah, blah, blah. But what he's doing behind the doors, in my opinion, and he's abusing the powers that have never been abused. And that's the difference. And I think that's the biggest difference between Trump and, even let's say the Koch brothers, right? Who we're going to get to talk about next. Trump is taking those risks because he knows his time's limited. For him, what's the worst,
He's just doing everything to position himself and his quote-unquote empire. He's making billions, if he's worth what they say he is on paper, which I doubt it. He owes Russian banks too much money, honestly. I'm not really into Russian conspiracy theories, but he does owe Russian banks, which is owned by Putin. I mean, he's not as rich as he thinks he is or anybody else thinks he is. He's not a good businessman. He sure the hell's not a good leader.
No, he's definitely not.
But that's the thing. Think about this. This is worst case scenario for someone to say, okay, what if someone was like not a Manchurian candidate, but a Manchurian individual says, I'm going to run on a Democratic ticket and I'm going to tell everyone everything they want to hear. But as soon as I get in, I'm going to whip my big old thing out and I'm going to show them what I got. And I'm going to ruin this whole thing. One person could do that as the president. One person could just really flip the cart and say, screw this. I'm using executive orders as fast and as many as I can. And I'm going to just declare Caesar, almost with executive orders. He could limit powers and all that kind of shit. We need to have some checks and balances in that place as well, a little more at least. That's why we have checks and balances. But I think it takes too many votes to overturn the president. Like, what's that called? A filibuster? You got to have 75% or 80%?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's been a while since we've seen one of those. I think now would be a good time, to filibuster his stuff.
Yep, but everybody's too chicken at this point to do it.
Right. The Republicans hitched their wagon to him, man. They're going to go down the hill with him. This is the death of the Republican Party if they don't do something radical about faces, or this just be the death of their party. It'll be libertarian versus Democrats soon, or maybe libertarian versus progressive. Get rid of Democrats and Republicans, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, you never know. You never know where the parties are going to go. But that's, when we look at that, and you look at, the libertarian parties and things like that, it's kind of funny because David Koch, or Koch, or Koch, I'm sorry.
Yep.
David Koch actually ran as a vice presidential candidate back in either the 80s or 90s on a libertarian ticket. Isn't that funny? I did not know that until I started doing research, and I was like, I didn't know this dude actually ran for office that way. No idea.
Well, they paid for enough people to get in. He knew what to do. Just like Steyer's doing right now. He just wrote checks, and he's damn near qualified for the next debate after 2 weeks. Just proves money talks and the rest of it walks. It's ridiculous.
Exactly. But you're right. If we could figure out how to move the U.S. politics and get rid of some of the ideology where you can only have the two parties, I think we would see a more well-balanced and fair, election. And we're seeing a little bit of it now. I mean, the Libertarians came in at, 1.8% or something like that? Was it 1.8?
Yeah, less than 2. It was less than 2, though. Yeah, roughly 2.
But still, that's a pretty high, compared to when I was growing up as a kid. We heard about Nader and all that only because my dad hated those people. Other than that, the media didn't report a lot. It wasn't a big thing. So it's just kind of funny, in the aspect of if those other parties could gain even 10% of the votes, each one of them, you would all of a sudden see a change. Now, I'll tell you right now, unless Elizabeth Warren runs Green Party, screw the Green Party. I can't put they're not progressive to some aspect, they're just not a progressive stance. And if that crazy lady runs Green Party, I don't even know what I'll do. I'll just have to make fun of her. I won't be able to help myself.
Yeah. Well, to me, I like the idea of having 4 instead of 2. 2 to the left, 2 to the right. That's fine. You can have Republicans, Libertarians who are right of center. Then you can have Democrats and progressives to the left of center. And then we'd be almost forced to rewrite and again, amend the Constitution a little bit to have ranked choice voting. And that would help give the underdogs a little bit of more skin in the game. Because if I was going to vote for an independent, and then I can say, well, I'm voting, my number one vote's going to be the independent, but if he can't win, I'm going to vote for the one that's left of centers closest to my views. You can at least settle for second. You can still help your side of the aisle type of thing. But that's a long way down the road.
That is. And that's kind of leads us into our next topic, right? When you watch and look at what the Koch brothers do and the amount of money that they spend and then how people perceive them, it's insanity to me. Or I guess it's not insanity any longer to me because it seems, like they're buying politics. and people like them can buy politics, and then they can donate a bunch of money somewhere else, and people will applaud them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really a two-faced type of scam. Like you said, I think I think the last thing I saw in 2016 election, they donated like, I think it was like $400 million to political pundits, and that's including the Senate, Congress, and the House, and the presidency. They have a say in everything. And they donate hundreds of millions of dollars, and what do they get in return? $1 trillion tax cut. Like that's the whole point. Spend a couple hundred million, you get $1 trillion or a couple $100 billion back. Not $1 trillion to them, but they got a major portion of that $2.4 trillion tax cut.
Exactly. And
it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is where does the Koch money come from? Why do people make fun of them? I mean, Bernie's gone after the Koch brothers, I don't know, ever since Bernie's been a thing.
For decades.
Yeah.
Don't they own like Monsanto and...
They might, but their money originally started, in basically it's a chemical company, right? An oil and chemical company. That's where they essentially started out years and years and years ago, because their father gave them a very successful business,
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it does. Except for these guys like to work in the shadows. They really do.
Right.
I mean, they do things, they're known, but they still are very, very under the radar compared to somebody like 45,
Yeah. Well, and Steyer. Steyer is just another version of them, just not as rich.
Exactly.
He's a major pundit. He's been financing Democrats for decades, and now he's like, screw it, I'll do it myself, kind of like Koch did back in the 80s. He said, I'm going to take a run at it myself as president, not vice president.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, David Koch died at 79.
Oh, yeah.
Last weekend. So we've been talking about David Koch and the Koch brothers for a reason, right? Because their legacy affects so much. And there's so many things that go into it. And you, unless you know who they are, you can't even begin to understand the underhandedness and that they have in today's society. And on this show, we've talked many times before about ultra-rich people, where the taxes should come from, why they should not be able to influence politics in the same way. And the problem becomes is if we allow these type of individuals to continue to amass wealth, to continue to influence everything, all we're going to do is continue to be stuck on the bottom end. And it's kind of funny, like my dad makes twice what I make, let's say, right? He votes Republican because he doesn't want taxes to take away all this stuff. What he doesn't realize is that if he actually voted for a progressive, they would actually start levying those taxes, he would see an increase, but so will all the top 1%. And then once that money gets brought back in there, the tax situation can level itself out.
Yes.
And then you get to that point where once that taxation levels itself out, if you saw a 20% tax increase, you're going to actually see a decrease, even if you continue to make more money. They're not going to bill you at a 40% rate all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying, let's level set this, get this money back into the economy, and then we could talk about what we're going, what rates and where the threshold should be for rich and super rich,
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, it should reflect, our priorities should be reflected in our budgets. And our budget doesn't reflect our priorities as the people, but it does as our budget looks just like it is because the Koch brothers said so.
Yeah.
And Halliburton and all those types, especially the War Machine. They have, I think it's 90% of Key Martin's budget is from military contracts, government, taxpayers' money. And
that's crazy.
90%. That's their whole business is war. Literally, they're Tony Stark.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Koch brothers is like the dude who ran the company for Tony Stark and he's abducted. I can't remember how. So there they are still behind the scenes. Tony Stark's the face of it, but they're behind the scenes manipulating everything with money and leverage.
Exactly. So they have a whole different perspective, right? And it's a different world. There's a Guardian article where they call it the Koch toptopus, which is basically a Koch brothers octopus. That's how many tentacles they have flailing around, right? They have this gathering called the Freedom Partners. Have you ever heard of this before?
No, not until I seen your article. Mm-mm.
I hadn't either. Never knew this organization existed. This is like a whole nother one of those Netflix documentaries that they should make, you know?
Yeah, no kidding.
Like I would watch this
Families.
one too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But now they're dubbing this the Koch toctopus, or I don't even know if that's how you say it. It's octopus. Kochtopus. There you go. Kochtopus. That's even better. I like that. Maybe I'll rename the episode Kochtopus.
But it reminds me of the Beastie Boys with Cookie Puss. Sorry.
There you go. That makes sense. You know, and the idea here, or the discussion on this is how far does this guy's legacy go? Right? You know, and I can't remember the name of the show. Man, I can't remember. But essentially this guy wants his legacy to live on. And it's a Marvel one that didn't do very well with Danny in it. Man, I cannot remember the name of this stupid show. Iron Fist. There was a guy in Iron Fist that basically he wanted to live forever, figured out a way to kind of do it, but all he cared about is his legacy. He didn't care about his kids. He didn't care about anything. He cared about his legacy. And actually, he faked his own death, right, and was living in the shadows, and only his one son knew that he existed. But the idea behind this thing is he wanted to become, you know, he wanted his name to be out there because his big thing is we don't live forever. The only thing that can live forever is our legacy.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's what the Koch brothers have done. They've built a legacy to distort American democracy.
Yeah. Well, if you looked at that article, it says that, you know, his legacy is going to be Citizens United. It says he donated $100 million in 2012 alone, 1 year.
Yeah.
That tells you how much money these sons of bitches got. $100 million in 2012, one cycle. That's it. And that he got that leverage from Citizens United. And I believe that's going to be his legacy. And hopefully this next president will overturn Citizens United and do democracy dollars and wash out their money.
Yeah. Well, if you get Bernie in, that's one of the things Bernie's actually committed to. That's, you know, and I'll be honest with you, as much as it pains me to say there's other candidates I really like, I think Bernie can actually get some of that done. You know, even with a little bit of a stalemate in Congress, I think Bernie has the tenacity to go after Citizens United. And we have to, you know, in business, you do these things called like Pareto analysis, right? Where it's the 80-20 rule. You know, essentially 80% of the problems are caused by 20% of the things. And if you attack this small 20%, you can fix 80% of your issues. Mm-hmm. And the big question is does Bernie have it right that Citizens United and a lot of these insane amounts of corporate money and low taxes, is that actually what's ruining America? Is that the biggest issue that is in America?
It's I don't know if it's the biggest, but it's definitely, you know, top three, you know, because between automation, AI is really taking away jobs and disproportionately displacing workers. And of course, democracy being uprooted and bought out. That's got to be a major factor because the policies only come from the people that are elected. And if the right people can't get elected because they can't outspend them, like Fred Upton in Michigan, like you can't unseat him. He's like the poor man's Koch brother is Fred Upton.
Exactly. So,
yeah.
So think about it, and this is why I want to have this conversation, because this gets into the business aspect, and this is exciting for me because I do consulting work and stuff like that for other businesses, and we dig into financials, we look at the different things, and one of the big questions I always ask them is, what's your long-term goal? Do you want to look at? Do you want to be narrowly focused on increasing your revenue or your EBITDA or your cash flow? Is that your specific thing, or do you actually want to look at how can I improve the process so that over the course of the time, all this stuff can get raised up? And, you know, if you're in a consulting project I was on at one point, they were investing all sorts of money into making the executive office look nice and and ensuring that they attract top talent to the executive office. But they were neglecting everybody on the production floor.
Yeah, that makes sense.
and when you
Not
looked
really.
at it, yeah, exactly. And when they looked at it, they were having to go through all these people because people would quit because they're getting overworked. And I was like, you're not getting consistency. You have to build your consistent basis, take care of your employees on the floor, at least to the minimum of the point where they feel like they can come into work and put in a full day's work. But if they are working for a paycheck specifically and are not actually working because they care enough to make the company successful, they're not the right team members on your bus. And Bernie, in fairness, maybe Bernie has that right when it comes to the United States. The fact that with the big money is spending and washing out all the little guys. And, there was a critique, I don't know what, 2 years ago, 3 years ago about Bernie and how much money he actually has and what he spends his money on. But I'll always go back to an interview I did in the Atheist Analysis days with a consultant that this lady consults for nonprofits and how to invest their money and how to make sure that, they stay within the guidelines and become successful and grow their business. And she says one of the sad things about this industry is that sometimes you have to pay some people at the top a lot of money to fit into the circles to get the connections to do that. And that if society wasn't built this way, we wouldn't have that problem, right?
Right.
But that's where we're at. Right here, the people like the Koch brothers, who are worth $49.2 billion or something like that this year.
Each.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They're worth so much money that $100 million is literally just a drop in the bucket for them. It's literally a, what do we care? It's inconsequential if I throw $100 million into the garbage.
So let's do the math on that. That is 0.04%.
Wow.
That's like you making $100 and you gave away a fourth of a penny. It's that inconsequential.
But it turned the election enough, right? To ensure that there was correct people appointed to the Supreme Court so that Citizen United could remain, right?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. They're playing the long game, man.
Yes, and they have the money to do that. And if anything we should have learned as kids, Monopoly is the crappiest board game you can play. Because once you get going, they ain't stopping you.
Snowball. There's no comebacks in Monopoly.
No. Yep. Once that money train takes off, everybody is out of luck.
That's the thing. Like you said, Monopoly is a very good example. That I like that actually. Now to think about it, because you don't see comebacks in Monopoly unless it's just pure luck, great luck for the one person and horrible luck for the other one. There's the only way you can come close to making a comeback. It's got to be a significant move, because other than that other person just has more income from the properties. That's just the way it is. Yeah.
And I'll give an example, and I don't know if my friend even listens to my podcast or not, but I'll give an example. When we first started hanging out again, he wanted to play Monopoly, and it's like, I don't normally play that because I get very angry. Because I like board games a lot, but I want something that's got a little bit more less variability to it, right? For example, there's a Star Wars Destiny card and dice game. If you roll crappy rolls, even if you're winning, if you roll a bunch of crappy rolls towards the end of the game, you can lose. There's that chance. And unless you have weighted dice, your dice is the same as the next person. Now, I'm not saying somebody doesn't have weighted dice. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I think it's too small of a card game for anybody to worry and spend money on that. But, the idea is I can amass, and I'll win. And I can amass this huge army, basically, to go after you. But the difference is if I roll all these blanks, how am I going to attack you? I'm going to take your money. I'm going to get rid of your cards. I can't. And Monopoly has none of those functions. And I had a friend when we first started hanging out again a couple years ago. We sat down with one of my sons and his wife and him and me, and we started playing Monopoly. Well, when you first go around, your goal has to be how can you buy up the most amount of property you can so that when you trade, you don't have to worry about it. Well, what was happening is we each bought an equal amount of property. We were making a little bit of money, but we couldn't complete collections. And he was more than happy to go around the board time after time after time again because none of us could really amass enough property to start winning. And then he was trying to negotiate with other people. Well, if you're a bad negotiator or you don't care to negotiate, you're just playing for fun. His wife all of a sudden traded away one thing that let him get, a complete collection. Well, now he can put houses and hotels on.
Yep.
And we played for an hour, and finally I just threw it down. I was like, I'm done playing. Because if I avoid your property, we stay even. If I hit your property, I'm screwed. Whenever you hit my properties, all I got to do is hit yours once, and we're done. After like 20 rounds around the board, you're able to put enough houses down that you could just keep upping it.
Yeah, it's just a death blow.
Yeah, and there's no counter to it. There's nothing that can counter it unless you make a mistake. And that's the problem. We should all be learning from this. Like this, when did this game come out? Was it like the 20s or something like that?
It had to be back into the railroads were a big deal. You're talking, World War II at the latest.
Yeah, I'm gonna look
this
this
really
up.
good. I really like that example because it does show you that, like, us as normal people, we have no properties. We have no way to nickel and dime them. All we have is the hopefully you can land on chance and flip a card and you get $200. If you land on Boardwalk, you got to pay them $4,750. It's a death blow. So that just computes to the statistic that says, I think it says that 70% of Americans can't afford a $500 unexpected cost right now. And I know I can. And that's just a perfect example.
Exactly. You have no way of coming back. And just for the record, there was a version of Monopoly that was around in 1902 to 1904 called the Landlord's Game.
Oh, brother.
Oh, man.
Rubbing their nickels together.
There you go. So that's how long this has been around. And none of us, nobody's seen this as this big thing, right? People aren't taking some of this seriously. And they're the Koch brothers, their empire and what they're doing. And again, maybe I'm preaching the choir here, but we have to be talking about these things. We have to be going out and saying these things. We have to be putting these different verbiages and different positions into our daily conversation, because people need to understand that what they're doing is truly a monopoly, and it is creating so much harm in politics that your everyday person is losing their voice. And at some point, there's only two options. We become a dictatorship, or we're going to have a revolution, and it's going to be bloody.
A coup.
There's no other things. And the funny thing is, and I've seen it, if enough of us were to get together, we would probably be able to overthrow the government. But it would be very hard, and there would be a lot of death and violence involved.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the things like this, a Koch brother can donate $100 million, which you said is less than a penny's worth of that person's income. He can donate that and take care of that. Those are the people that are going to be on the government side because they don't want to lose their money.
Right. So he can invest 2 pennies, less than 2 pennies, and get $100 more.
Yep.
That's a great investment. Business-wise, that pragmatism is obvious there, that if you invest, if anybody says, if you give me $2, I'll give you $100 in a year. Now, if I have $100, I'll say I'm going to donate $2 to, well, that'd be 25 people. I'm going to donate half my money this year. And then over the next 10 years, that $100 is going to be split up. It's going to become $1,000. That's a great investment. And you can afford to lose some of those $2 hits. You have 1 in 25. All it takes is one of those 25 to hit back, and you double your money. And that's just like, that's a mutual fund. That's the stock market. That's the housing market. And that's the Koch brothers.
Exactly.
who have their finger in all those cookie jars.
Yeah. Another neat little fact, they spent $20 million promoting legislation for Trump tax cuts in 2017. $20 million. Guess how much money that they benefited from this?
I'd love to hear this number.
Take a guess.
I'm going to say $500 billion, because they're filthy rich.
That's a lot. That is a lot.
I wouldn't be surprised. I'm
not
crazy.
bad. That's pretty high, man. They don't own that much money. But they were saved $1 billion in income tax. $1 billion
on income tax.
On income tax.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Think about
I was
that.
just thinking overall market, they're going to make hundreds of millions from this tax cut. But anyway,
they could.
yeah.
You're right. Yeah, they could benefit from that. This article doesn't actually talk about that. But that's the thing right there.
Mm-hmm.
How much is what percent of 20 million is of 1 billion? It can't be. It's got to be insanely.
That's 2%.
Yeah,
2%. Again, that's 2 pennies to 100, or $2 out of 100.
Exactly. That's what they spent to
Incredible.
get that.
That's what you call when the deck is stacked in your favor significantly. That's like you and me. If we make, let's just take a round number, we make $1,000 this week, and we both agree we're both going to put our money together. We're both going to spend $10 a piece to be $20. We're going to give it to our local politician, be it the mayor of Grand Rapids or whatever. And in return, the mayor of Grand Rapids is going to leverage your company and my business, and then that would turn into, what would that be, $20 times? Oh my God, you're talking, that's another $1,000 investment in a short amount of time for $20. You risk $10 a piece, and you get 1,000.
Exactly.
We would be suckers not to do it.
Exactly. And the idea of capitalism and how capitalism works just rewards people like that. Yeah. That's a reward. And people like Trump and people, I don't care, people in the Republican Party believe, hey, you should pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. But here I am, I'm low in, middle income, if even that. I don't, in my opinion, I'm not anywhere near a middle class because I don't really think it exists. But I can't afford to pay for my kids to go to college out of pocket.
Right.
Somebody that makes twice what I do probably still can't afford to pay for their kids to go to college out of pocket. But yet, that guy invested $2 to get a 98% return.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, we have kids and people going into debt to go to college just to earn what they spend in student loans.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how that's fair.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Of course, it's not fair. It's capitalism.
Exactly.
But
tell me how it succeeds.
We can fix it. But it succeeds for some.
For a small percent.
Capitalism at its purest form is okay with other people suffering for their mistakes. They're being punished for their mistakes, for their bad investments, for their bad choice of food, or their you bought the wrong car. It's a lemon. Now you're screwed. Now you got to get another loan. You got to pay on this loan. Your car you're not driving. It's that kind of snowball effect for the little people that, like if my car, like I don't have a car, I have a company car. But if I had a car and I fell asleep driving and wrecked it, I'm in big, big trouble. and it'd take me a decade to crawl back out of that hole.
Yep.
I don't know.
It's crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the last piece I kind of want to touch on, I mean, we all know he's a piece of crap. But the last piece, we want to touch on, and there's a lot of people that are arguing and saying, we should not be gloating over his death. Somebody else on my Facebook page said, well, I mean, technically speaking, there's just going to be somebody that comes along and replaces him. And that's true. I think that's true. But at the exact same time, again, tell me how, I don't understand why we shouldn't be somewhat excited about this. And I posted and I basically said that I thank God, but God don't exist, right? But we should probably be thanking him for the stain on humanity that this Koch brother was. And in reality, if there is a God, we should be condemning that God, because a merciful God would have taken this dude out when he first got diagnosed with cancer years and years and years ago. And everybody wants to, jump on me and say, why are you celebrating this guy's death and blah, blah, blah. And I'm telling you, I'm not celebrating his death. I'm celebrating the fact that we have taken out a key player, at least at this current time, in the GOP democracy. And it's insane for me to think that we wouldn't be celebrating maybe not him as an individual dying, but we would be celebrating the death of the machine that he is.
Yeah, his influence dies with him, kind of.
Exactly. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think we should be celebrating his death? Do you think this is something that we should be going back out there and I should be apologizing for?
I don't know if you should apologize, but me personally, I'm not gonna, you speak for yourself when it comes right down to it. But for me, I'm trying to be a better person, and I'm trying to be a humanist, a secular humanist that says we want to prevent all suffering. He really didn't suffer. Let's be honest. He never had a suffering day of his life, and that's being a pretty shitty point of view for me to say that, because everyone suffers, but his life ended. He's just a person. The problem is we created a system that allows this type of person to exist and negatively impact everyone around them. So I don't want to celebrate his personal death or the end of his life, but I do want to celebrate hopefully at least a speed bump in his legacy and negatively affecting our politics is about the best thing I can really say. But who sees? Well, it depends on how good or bad his kids are. How much? What are they willing to sacrifice to keep this thing going?
Exactly.
Maybe they're nice people, but statistically, I doubt it, because trust fund children become Trump,
That's very true.
And the Koch brothers. So,
yep.
I hope his legacy at least has a speed bump a little bit to slow that down, the influence. Because right now, that means his whole financial portfolio is being debated in court, probably for another year. So hopefully at least ties up his money so he can't be as influential. But there's still another brother out there doing things. So
yep, and that money is still going to live on. So
yeah, yep. And help who?
Well, I know a lot of poor people that need some help right now. You know what? We could eradicate student debt with just what that one guy's worth and have money left over.
Well, if we just took all of his campaign donations to the TV networks and the Facebook ads, he could end homelessness in probably 25 states.
Exactly. Yep.
It's so selfish to keep it all. It doesn't make any sense.
Nope.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to celebrate his personal death because he is someone's dad. He's someone's brother. He's someone's child. But at the same time, he hurt a lot of people's dad, fathers, mothers, sisters, child, friends, roommates. He hurt many, many people with his influence, I guess you'd say.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap the show up, we always like to do our quick saves for the week. So I'll let you go first, Boyce. Yours is a little bit more interesting than mine was.
Well, let me pull that back up. Where'd I put it at?
Yours was a news article about a patient's death from vaping. Yeah,
they've had over 200 people in Illinois in a short amount of time all have lung-related diseases, and they all recently started vaping within the last year. That's the only common denominator they have. And it's showing that we have not done enough research on this to have kids doing this instead of smoking cigarettes. Neither one of them are good. But it looks like this vaping business is a rapid decrease in health and respiratory lung diseases. I work in a medical field, so this really scares the hell out of me. I'll be seeing people younger than me as patients for respiratory failure.
Yeah.
Because of vaping.
Exactly.
And the studies have not been done. This is America. What the hell is the FDA for? How does this get through? Are the Koch brothers investors in this shit or what? That's how I see it.
They might be. You never know.
Do they own whatever the name brand is that's on TV? I don't know. But it's showing hundreds of people having lung-related diseases, and the only common denominator is vaping that they know of right now. There's not enough research on it yet, but it says that the flavors are safe for consumption, but there's been no studies done for vaporizing into your lungs.
Yeah. I mean, how would we know, honestly, if we don't study it, whether it's more harmful than a cigarette? Look how long it took them to get cigarette studies out there. And, I've always argued, I used to smoke, in fairness. I won't lie and say I didn't smoke, and a lot of people will criticize that, and smoking's bad. But when all of a sudden you see all these vaping come out, you just go, well, what is it doing to your lungs? Is it constricting it? Does it have long-term effects? Maybe it doesn't cause cancer, but does it cause issues inside of your lungs where they wrap up? Oh, and by the way, it's a lot more intense than just smoking cigarette. I'll be honest with you, how many people do you see chain smoking cigarette after cigarette after cigarette after cigarette, basically after the 70s and 80s? You just don't.
Not as much, no.
No, it's not like, back then people would light up cigarette after cigarette after cigarette, and look what happened. That's what vaping is, though, is even if you're just doing just a little bit, if you're consistently doing it all the time, it's like a low dose, to your lungs. And it cannot be, there's no way it can be good. My wife told me, because I wanted to vape when it first came out just because of the nicotine, right? And she said, no, you have no idea what it'll do to your lungs, but can you imagine? Your lungs are meant to breathe in air. I don't know what that shit is, but it's not air.
Well, and that's the thing. Our lungs are not meant to hold fluid in them. That's called pneumonia. And so pretty much you're giving yourself an increased risk of pneumonia. And I believe what the study said, it forms these pockets of stuff that you normally exhale, which is CO2 or carbon dioxide, or carbon dioxide, yeah. And so now it gets trapped in your lungs in these mucus bubbles types of thing. And that's pretty much what what do we call that? Pleural, I can't remember the medical term for it now, but pneumonia, it's water in your lungs, you're drowning.
Yeah. Yep.
And so you're introducing this compact vapor, and think about all the vapor that comes out. That's a lot of smoke vapor that comes out from just one little draw. It shows you how concentrated it is. It gets in your lungs and it expands rapidly. There's little alveoli sacs that absorb oxygen, and the waste product, the CO2, you breathe it out, and that goes to the trees and the plants, and vice versa. Thus, we need the Amazon's on fire, by the way. So so that's the long-term health risk can't be seen because it has been used long-term. It came out 10 years ago. And now it's been 10 years, and we're seeing some pretty quick results in one city and I think I can't remember what it was. It's in Illinois, though. But yeah, over 200 in a very short amount of period of time. So that's pretty scary statistics. It's not cancer, but it's definitely respiratory diseases.
Exactly. Well, my quick save of the week came from a kind of a personal thing to some extent. And it was because, this is your phone spying on you, but I've listened to a lot of Irish music with a coworker over the last week and a half because of driving back and out there, and we discovered we both like Irish music. Well, I've played the Dropkick Murphys and probably searched those more than one time.
Yes.
And I get an article, though, that shows up that the Dropkick Murphys performed a private show for a 3-year-old patient that had cancer.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I love that band. I'll admit it. I love that band. That band is one of my favorite bands ever. I go see them almost every time they come around. They're just a really fun band to see. But it's amazing to see, them. That's a humanitarian thing, right? They could have tried to find a place to donate it as a tax write-off. They could have tried to find a place that would pay them to do this, and they could donate their services. But instead, they did this all on their own.
In their lawn, they showed up.
Yeah.
That's humanism, man. I always say music is humanism in an auditory form. You're giving everyone something for free, noise that brings them pleasure. That's music, man. Same thing with art. Any kind of art is you give it away for free in person. So yeah, I saw that thing with that kid, man. I absolutely loved it because I love Dropkick Murphys too. And I remember the first time I ever heard of them was just from that one movie, Boondock Saints. Was it Boondock Saints?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as I heard that song, I was like, oh my God, these guys, their voices are powerful. And and it's Irish stuff. I don't know. I like that stuff. Like Conor McGregor's crazy ass. I have a Celtic knot tattoo on my shoulder and on my left calf. I mean, I like the culture, but the music is awesome, man. Dropkick Murphys kicked ass. On that performance right there, I'd be willing to go to a concert now just to say thank you with my money.
Exactly. I would too. Well, with that being said, I think we've exhausted the energy I have to put into bitching about the Koch brothers and Trump for a week.
There you go.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you, Boyce, for joining us today as a guest. If you want to check out his podcast, all the links are in the comment section. I'm sorry, not the comment section, but the link section on our post. And you can check out Mindful Skeptics podcast. And Boyce, tell everybody what you've been talking about for the last week.
Well, I've been doing a lot on politics just because it's the hot topic right now. So I've been doing this thing called 100 Policies in 100 Days, where I'm reading 100 of Andrew Yang's policies, one a day. And I'm just putting it out there because most people don't, they don't look and they don't know. And some people just don't like reading. So I figured I'd put it in an auditory form. I'd read it out loud and then review it and look for comments and just, start the discussion. And that's been my real focus lately has been on that. And then also going on other people's podcasts, talking about religion as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody else, for joining us this week. We'll be back hopefully next week with another amazing episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you all and have an amazing night.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker. CellarDoorSkeptics.com